For now, I want to bring in my expert legal panel to get their thoughts on the verdict. I'm joined this afternoon by litigator Richard Schoenstein and trial attorney Peter Aziz. Thank you both for being here with me. Richard, I want to start with you. What is your reaction to this verdict?
I wasn't surprised at all. I didn't think there was anywhere else for the jury to go with this. The defense, I thought it was the defense of least resistance. They didn't really deny that he killed the women. They were really trying to get the jury maybe to have a little bit of sympathy or find some reason not to treat him as a serial killer, but they didn't even make an effective case to do that. I wasn't surprised with this verdict whatsoever.
Yeah, no, I agree. I just want, for our viewers, I want to break down the importance of a victim's impact statement, particularly so prior to sentencing and after a guilty verdict.
Well, typically, one of the purposes of a victim impact statement is to inform the sentencing, to give the judge the impact from the victim's point of view. Here, that really wasn't at issue because there was no discretion. This was going to be life in prison without parole based on the nature of conviction. So the other purpose of a victim impact statement is catharsis, is to allow the family members of the victims to express themselves face to face with the defendant. And that's what we saw here in full effect. You know, you might have thought these victims were sex workers, they were on the fringe, they were broken and unimportant. No. They were daughters, they were sisters, they were mothers. And these victims, their family members, said that beautifully. They were loved, they are missed, and this maniac who killed them for no reason whatsoever, except whatever was twisted in his head, will spend the rest of his life in prison, appropriately so.
We were talking about the timing of these victim impact statements. Typically, a victim impact statement would come before the sentencing. It allows the court to consider an appropriate sentence. It allows the victims or the victims' families to also weigh in vis-a-vis their statements to the court as to why a judge should sentence the defendant in a certain way. These were after the sentencing. Do you think that it lessens the impact in any way of these victim impact statements?
No. I don't think it lessens the impact at all. I mean, we're watching them today because we saw them yesterday and they were so impactful. They were so moving. They were full of emotion, more so than the trial itself. I mean, the victims and their families always tell the story better than the lawyers do when you get down to it. And so that's why we're watching them and talking about them. And, you know, the defendant here said he was cleaning up the streets. That was his explanation. And the victim's daughter that we heard said he killed a woman who mattered, a woman who was loved. He wasn't cleaning up the streets. He was causing pain and suffering. And now we have these victims who are telling us about that and talking about forgiveness. I mean, how amazing are these statements? I think they're very meaningful, no matter what the timing.
Richard, I want to ask you your final thoughts about this verdict, and particularly what was the strongest evidence that you think the prosecution had? I think it was Pena's testimony. Yes, you had the interrogation and the confession, but also her testimony for me was really resounding. Quick.
Her testimony and that confession. Listen, Imran, you're a great trial lawyer. Peter on with us today. He's a great trial lawyer. You guys couldn't have gotten this person acquitted. Nobody could have gotten an acquittal here. He shot 4 women point blank in the head or neck and murdered them. He was guilty. The evidence was overwhelming. Open and shut.
Absolutely. I agree. And the jury agreed. You had a pretty open and shut case. And this defendant is going to be spending the rest of his life behind bars for the crimes he's been convicted with. Stay